Hi everybody, welcome back to Air Canada 855, Vancouver, London to Vancouver. Just coming up on our top of descent, so why don't we start planning that right now. We're going to go ahead and take a look at our CDU, and we're expecting the ILS 26 right into Vancouver, and that's on the Whistler 3 arrival. And Elite is on our route, so we're going to go ahead and choose Elite as a transition. Take a look at our legs page. So here to Elite, to Kine, Cease, Omsuv. And looking at the chart over here, Omsuv we can expect to cross between 14,000 or less, 10,000 or more, 250 knots. That's there in the CDU, the FMC. And then Lesson at or above 10, Miso at or above 8,000, Metpo at or above 5, Cetus at or above 4, and then vectors to 26 right. Let's go ahead and exec that. Next, we're just going to update our descent forecast. So let's go there, go to forecast request. While we were in the flight, go ahead and did a step climb up to 38,000 feet. So that's the final cruising altitude. And here comes our forecast. Don't think it's going to change much, but let's load it. Yeah, I did it shortly before before I started recording again. So, if you go to our VNAV page, you can see we are expected to descend at 1845 Zulu. That's about 23 nautical miles from now, so about 6 miles a minute, another 2.5 minutes or so until we start our descent. Taking a look at the rest of our route. That up on screen. We'll go in plan mode. So we're coming up on here. Next will be Elite, then Kine, and then Cease. And as you can see, we're basically coming in from the northeast, and then we're going to turn actually southeast. Numerous mountains around the Vancouver area, so part of that's to vector away from those. As I said, Omsuv is 14,000 or below, 10,000 or above at 250 knots. And then Lesson is at or above 10. It's calling us to reset our altitude here. We'll do that momentarily. And then Miso 8 or above. Metpo 5 or above. Cetus 4 or above. And then vectors to get us onto our ILS. Okay, let's go ahead and reset our altitude. Now, we're not flying with air traffic control, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us down to 10,000. That's the first restriction. First restriction on our flight plan. And you can see we're about 10 miles from our top of descent. And then once we start our descent, what we'll do is we'll pick up the ATIS for Vancouver. And then we will plan our approach as well. Ended up being a really smooth flight, actually, across the Atlantic. Very non-eventful at all. Not that we were expecting much, but you never know what's going to happen. Okay, we are 4 nautical miles from our top of descent. Similar to on takeoff, when I mentioned how you push the throttles all the way forward during takeoff, I like to do a similar thing on descent, just to make sure that the throttles, my physical throttles, don't override the position of my my virtual throttles. And you can see this little blue tag there on the ICAS. Little blue areas above, that's actually the physical position of my throttles. So you can see they're remaining the same while the virtual throttles are reducing. I'm going to go ahead and reduce those all the way down to idle right now. What's going to happen is if you look here at the mode enunciator, on the throttle mode. You can see it's commanding idle, which, as you can see, is what's happening here on the auto throttles, and you should be able to see them move on their way down to idle. There they go. And then once they hit idle, they're actually going to go into hold mode. And at hold mode, they're there. So you can see hold is enunciated. At hold, I can actually physically move my throttles and command an appropriate N1 speed. So for instance, there's a particular, or N1 percentage, so if there's a particular speed I wanted to keep up, I could do that. But by default, for a descent like this, where we're trying to do the optimal descent path, we just want to keep them in idle. Okay, let's go ahead and pick up our ATIS information. I'm using Active Sky Next here, so the frequency for that is 122.2, 122.02, excuse me. Here we go.
Charlie, Yankee, Victor, Romeo, airport information, Delta 1500, Zulu, weather, wind 294 at 14, gusting to 20, visibility 10, sky condition, few clouds at 1500, ceiling 2700, broken, temperature 10, dew point 6, altimeter 3009, advise on initial contact you have information, Delta, Charlie, Yankee, Victor, Romeo.
Okay, so information Delta is current there at Vancouver. Winds are out of the west at 14 knots, west-northwest, 294. At 14 knots, gusting to 20. Visibility 10 miles. Sky conditions 1500 broken. Sorry, few at 1500, 2700 broken. Temperature 10. Dew point 6, altimeter 3009. First things first, it says let's pre-select our altimeter setting. Now we're still in standard mode, but if we go ahead and we can pre-select that here, 3009. And that just means when we pass through our transition level of 18,000 feet, we can just hit the standard button again, and that'll go to our pre-selected altimeter. Make sure that is preset on the first officer's side as well. Put it back to inches, it's back in North America. There we go. Okay, so we've got our altimeter setting. Let's go ahead and take a look at our approach that we're going to be on. So we're on the ILS DME, or ILS radar, runway 26 right. One thing to look at is our minimum safe altitude. There's lots of mountains in the area north of Vancouver. So our minimum safe altitude, if we had to just get down as fast as we could, is 12,800. You can see the minimum sector altitudes here. So 7,000, 5,000, 3,800, 7,000. That is kind of different to how they're displayed in the United States, but the principle's the same, in that it's showing us for each quadrant what the minimum altitude is that we can be at and still assure terrain clearance. So a nice way to display that, actually, is to go to our fix page. And we had some fixes left over from our flight earlier, so let's go ahead and erase those. We can just have, oh, we had 3 of them. Okay, so these are based off of the Vancouver VOR, minimum safe altitude, YVR. So we'll enter Vancouver, Yankee, Victor, Romeo as our fix. And from 090 to 180, the minimum altitude is 7,000, and that's typically a 25-mile radius. So let's go ahead and put in 180 at 25 miles. Next, from 180 to 270 is 7,000, so we'll do 270 at 25 miles. 270 to 360 is 3,800, so 0 at 25 miles. I think I have to do 360 actually. There we go. So now with those fixes in there, I'm going to go back to plan mode. Look at my legs so we can get zoomed in a little bit here. There. So obviously there's a lot to see here, but the important things we're paying attention to is from 270 to 360 minimum altitude, minimum from 090, 270 to 360, minimum altitude is 3,800, 090 to 180, so that's these ones here. Minimum safe altitude 7,000, 7,000, and 5,000. So it's just a way to visualize the airspace a little bit to give us a better idea of where we're going. Okay, so we are in our descent. And again, you can see that little banana there. That when we were climbing out indicated where we were going to achieve our altitude that's selected in our altitude window, and we have 10,000 selected. So we're expecting to hit that in about 20, 40, 50 miles or so. It's always possible we're going to have to put the speed brakes on when we're in our descent, but we'll see what happens. Let's get our audio panel configured. So you might be familiar with the marker beacon. As we go over the outer marker, it's kind of a 1 second, half-second tone. We can have that. We can listen to that by moving this over to marker and turning that on, so we'll be able to hear the marker tone as we pass by the beacon. Chances are, before we do that, even though the runway will be identified by our navigation system automatically, it's not bad to listen to the Morse code identifier for the runway, just to be sure. It's kind of interesting to see how our inertial reference system drifts over time. So it's obviously really nice that we have GPS on this plane. That's relatively new to have GPS in all airplanes. It's just become really common in the past 10 years. These little barbells here is our current GPS position. So it's right there on the tip of the nose, so you can see how accurate it is. Interestingly enough, our ADARU, our inertial reference unit, thinks we're over here, almost 7 miles off course, and that is because of how they drift over time. It's about 1 mile an hour is the amount they can drift, which sounds like a lot, and it is, but you have to remember when you're flying over the ocean is about the only time, if you don't have GPS, is about the only time you ever have to worry about being out of navigation range of VORs and things like that. And that's actually what you can see here, the little R319. That is, we are on the 319 radial from Vancouver, and the flight management computer is actually updating our position based off of this. So if we look at nav date, what do we want here? Position. So we looked at this first position page when we first started the flights where we initialized our system. But if you go down to the next page here, you can see that this is where the FMC thinks we are, and it's using the GPS for updating. This is where the inertial navigation system thinks we are, where the GPS thinks we are, and based off of our radio location, so where we are from Vancouver, this is where it thinks we are. So it uses a bunch of different sources and mixes them together to determine the actual position of the plane. And then you can see our individual GPS left, GPS right, FMC left, FMC right, and FMC right is our primary flight management computer today. I'll see our bearing and distance from each other. So GPS left thinks we're going 0 degrees, and we're 0 nautical miles off of our center point. GPS right 326.1 miles, so on and so forth. Go ahead and turn that position information off. I'm going to turn terrain on my side. Like I said, lots of mountains around here. And we're passing through our transition level, so we'll set 3009 on the altimeter. Let's finish getting set up for our approach. And we're going to choose the init ref page. This is where we select our landing speeds. These are the recommended or default settings: 20 degrees, 159 knots, 25, 148, 30 degrees, 140. We're just going to use 30 degrees. But we have a relatively significant wind. That was 294 at 14 knots gusting to 20. So what does that give us then for a crosswind? So 263 knots, or 263 is the course. Just trying to do the quick math here to figure out the crosswind component. Let's see. Of course, as you would expect, there's a lot of tools out there online. So we said the wind was 294 at 14. And the runway course is 263. So that gives us a crosswind component of about 7 knots. So what we're going to do then is we're going to take that 30 and 140, we're going to add 7 knots to it. So that's the entirety of the crosswind. And then we're going to add half the gusts. So it's a 6 knot gust, so we'll add 3 to it. So we're going to add 10 knots to our speed. So flaps 30 at 150 knots will be our VREF, or VR approach speed. Let's go through our descent checklist. Recall has been checked. Notes, nothing to worry about right now. Our auto brake, let's see, how long of a runway do we have here that we're looking at? It's 10,000 feet. And we're going to want to take the, let's see, we're parking at stand D49, according to FlightAware today. So we're going to want to exit there at Mike 4. We'll go with auto brakes 1. And then we'll switch over to manual braking as necessary. Landing data, as we said, flaps 30, VREF 150. We still need to do our minimums. Let's take a look at that right now. ILS for 26 right, straight in ILS is 209 feet. So we will set our barometric minimums to 209. And that is when we're on our ILS approach. Even though visibility and clouds are pretty good here in Vancouver, that'll be the point where if we don't have the runway in sight, that's the point where we'll have to go around. So landing data is checked, approach briefing is completed, descent check was complete. And it's telling us drag required to get on path, so we're going to raise the spoilers a bit. Speed brakes. You can only raise them up really to about halfway in flight. See if we can see them out there. There they are. You can see them out there on the wing. Not a bad practice to keep your hand on the spoilers if you are keep your hand on the spoiler lever if you're using it on your throttle. Just helps you not forget that they're out. Okay, we can probably put them back in now. You can see we're reducing our speed now to a target of 250 knots. And I'm going to go ahead and give us lower altitude. So we need CETUS at 4,000 above. Let's put 4,000 in. And our current heading is 134. Let's get that synced up. And because we haven't done it yet, let's make sure the seatbelt sign's on. Okay, so we're starting to pick up the ILS here, so let's go ahead and, even though it's been identified, you can see here on the navigation display, it's identified it as India Romeo Delta, 262 degrees, it's 262 degrees in prepared, it's actually 263 in real life, that's okay. And let's go ahead, even though that's identified, let's pull it up on the audio just so we can hear it. Okay, so runway is identified, so we have the correct localizer. If you look on the approach chart, you can see the Morse code there, so you don't have to know what IRD is in Morse code, but just you know, measure twice, cut once. Never hurts to be sure. Okay, next heading is, what is that? 082, 082. Now, in the actual approach that we're going for here, in real life, it would we'd get vectors from ATC once we pass. What was it? Yeah, once we pass Cetus. So we'll just sort of do it on our own here as we go along. We're through 10,000 feet now, so let's get our lights on. Take a quick look at the overhead just to make sure we're not missing anything. Put weather on the first officer side just because we've got terrain on mine. And drag is required because we're now below 10,000 feet, so it's trying to get us down to 240 knots. The gusting winds, I would expect to probably be a little bit of turbulence here on our approach. Okay, so as far as our approach goes, runway 26 right, we're expecting Agnad at 3,000. Totem is going to be our final approach fix. That'll be 1,540 feet, which we should cross Totem. At that point, we'll set our clock, and we're going to be going at about 150 knots. So we can expect 1 minute 50 seconds until we hit the outer marker, or excuse me, until we hit our decision height. Let's go ahead and switch our standby altimeters over to inches. We're still in inches over there. And we're passing through 8,000 feet. Run our approach checklist. Altimeters are set and cross-checked. Approach checklist complete. Okay, everybody, that wraps up this video. In the next session, we will cover the approach, the landing, and then taxiing, mitigate, and shutting down. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.